Rev it up and welcome to Cars Yeah, show number 2189. Be prepared to be inspired.
This is Cars Yeah, where you'll enjoy interviews with inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Mark Green is here to provide you with a fuel injection of automotive inspiration. So get in, sit down, buckle up, and get ready for a wild ride here on Cars Yeah.
Hello, inspiring automotive enthusiasts, and welcome to Cars Yeah. Today I'm in Marion Station. Where's Marion Station? We'll find out in a minute with a very special guest by the name of Max Kaiserman. Max, welcome to Cars Yeah. Do you have any gear, and are you ready to release the clutch?
I'm ready, Mark.
All right, we'll have some fun. Now, before I give you a proper introduction and we get into this very cool business you've created, what's one little thing that people don't know about you, Max?
One little thing that people don't know about me. I did voices when I was a kid, and then I actually worked in radio for a little while, which is funny that we're doing a podcast here. And
the new radio.
Yeah, exactly. The new radio. But I know I worked at an AM radio station as right out of, or in college. I was the specialist at doing different, we do commercials and stuff. So because only 3 or 4 people worked in the station, we'd all do different voices for the commercials. So, like we're doing a commercial for a funeral home or something, and you do it very dour, it's Rosenberg's funeral home, like that's, and then there'd be something like a kids thing, and you'd like a Phillies game coming up or whatever. So somebody would do another voice. So just 3 people, but we had probably 50 people on staff.
So they thought, yeah.
So I did a lot of those voices.
Okay, so I'm going to have you do the coolest or goofiest or funniest voice for me. And what I want you to say is, this is Max Kaiserman on Cars Yeah.
Well, so I can do all the Family Guy voices really well.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, you pick anyone you want. You pick anyone you want.
Are you a Family Guy fan?
A little bit. I don't watch a lot of TV, but I do know some of the voices. And of course, I knew Adam West, and he was a voice on there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
I did. So I have the same voice as Seth MacFarlane, so I can do Peter, Stewie, and Quagmire.
Okay.
And stuff
Well,
like that.
you do one again. This is Max Kaiserman with Mark Green on Cars Yeah. All right, you go.
But I do it as Stewie. You want me to just do
Stewie? Okay.
Hi, this is Stewie Griffin, and we're with Mark Green on Cars Yeah. Tune in anytime you want.
I love it.
It's the internet, folks.
See, you were made for this. Yeah, that was perfect. Yeah. Very good.
Cars Yeah.
Cars Yeah. You do much better than I do. Well, let me give you a proper, now that we're laughing, let me give you a proper introduction. Max Kaiserman, one of many talents, is the owner of Luna Replicas, a vintage automotive and space apparel company, recreating the clothing and gear from the 1960s classic racing teams as well as early NASA programs. How cool is that? Max has always had a passion for classic cars and other machines, specifically airplanes and steamships, and the uniforms and equipment that goes with them. He has inspired others to be interested in history, technology, and turning wrenches through Luna. Through exactly replicated apparel and gear, making history fashionable can be a gateway to historic inspirations. Max works with preserving and interpreting museum collections and enjoys working on his classic cars, which include some unique rides, an old Army Jeep, a Bel Air, a GT350 Mustang clone, like I used to have, a 72 Corvette convertible, and guess what? He's also got astronaut Al Warden's 71 custom LS5 Corvette from Apollo 15. This is one cool dude. We'll be back in just a moment, so park your spaceship and we'll be right back. Autumn has arrived, the weather's changing, and that means your vehicles need extra protection against everything Mother Nature can drop. Covercraft offers you a multitude of layers of protection for your special rides. Are you putting your summer toys away, watercraft, RV, motorcycles, trailers, or even your patio furniture? Covercraft has a custom fit cover for whatever your need. Covercraft offers you 10 different car cover options. That's right, 10 for your special vehicle's protection, whether stored inside or out. All carefully crafted into the form and fit with the quality and attention to detail that's been their standard since 1965. And don't forget their custom fit seat covers, pet pad. Fido's going to get wet and muddy, I guarantee it. Dash mats, sunscreens, and custom fit floor mats and trunk mats. Whatever the surface you want to protect, Covercraft has your solution. If you use the code YEAH21 at covercraft.com, you'll get 10% off your Covercraft order. That's right, 10% off. Simply use the code YEAH21 at checkout. Come on, Mother Nature, bring it on. Covercraft, protecting the things that move you. When it was time to renew my collector car policy, my carrier raised my rates by a lot. But why? My usage was the same, my car's value was the same, and I had never made a claim. I didn't even have a ticket. The only change was their rate, and they had no reason why. What's with that? I researched my options, I spoke to others, and with American Collectors Insurance, what a difference. A live person actually answers the phone. She spent time learning about me. Why wait until your next premium is due? Give them a call today for your personal agreed value quote. Call 866-AC1-YEAH. That's 866-224-9324. Tell them you're a friend of mine, Mark Green at Cars Yeah. American Collectors Insurance, classic car insurance designed by collectors for collectors, automotive enthusiasts just like you and me. That's American Collectors Insurance. Fall is here, and you know what that means. Time to put a good coat of protection on your vehicle. I'm teamed up with AutoGeek, and they've been the leading source of auto detailing products, accessories, and expert knowledge for more than 20 years. What started back in 1997 as a small mail-order catalog company grew into a multi-website based e-commerce store, and that's what they are today. With a large online presence on its own website featuring close to 100 different brands, AutoGeek has grown to be the largest car care retailer in the country. AutoGeek's wholesale program serves accounts in over 30 countries, and its retail sector ships worldwide. If you want to protect your vehicle this fall, and you should, go to autogeek.net for the best product selection on the internet today and technical support. Autogeek.net is where I go for my detailing needs. That's autogeek.net. All right, Max. Well, we are back. So we're going to talk about how did this whole crazy fun idea for a business come about? Because looking on your website just makes me smile. And, I'm friends with Peter Brock, and I've seen him wearing a jacket that looks just like a jacket. Maybe he bought it from you.
He did.
He did. Okay, there you go.
Well, we gave it to him, actually. Peter gets a free one.
Of course, Peter's Peter, right? So, yeah, I think that's cool. So how did this all come about, Luna Replicas?
Mark, that's a really great question. And if your podcast is about 4 hours long, I can give you the whole story.
We got to do the condensed version here.
Right. The Campbell soup version is basically as a hobby, I was a reenactor. I did World War II reenacting and stuff specifically with museums. So like the level at which we did it was more than just, the weekend Civil War reenactment or something like that. It was museum programming, what we call living history, and the uniforms and equipment for that. Especially, I'm a bigger guy. I'm 6'3", 200 pounds. Like at the time, so a lot of this stuff needed to be reproduced, especially now it's 50, 60, 70 years later. World War II equipment's fallen apart. So the level at which the reproductions of World War II equipment was made was so perfect. And I said, why doesn't anybody do this with NASA stuff? Especially a lot of that stuff's really cool to wear. And from my living history background, I knew that when you put the uniform on, when you show kids or even, adults, anybody, when you immerse them in a historical experience, you learn it a lot better. You take it to heart, and the people that are doing it immerse themselves in it as well, so that they can tell the personal story, that they can impart something that they've learned, not just wartime, but like living history museums like Mount Vernon or Colonial Williamsburg and stuff. That's just this immersive experience. It gets you into the mood, and you learn history a lot better than sitting in a lecture or reading it in a book. So I said, why not NASA programs? And it's the same time period, we kind of extended into historic racing and automotive, also American car racing. But the NASA component of it was, this is 50 years since the beginning, at the time, is the 50 years since the beginning of the Apollo program. Several of the astronauts actually were doing outreach. Apollo astronauts were doing programs and talks and things. And actually, one of them reached out to me. Astronaut Al Warden himself had said, "Wow, so I had started talking with some folks about people that make these reproduction uniforms. I said, well, why don't we do a NASA flight jacket? It's based on a military jacket. It's just different colors. It's unique and different patches and stuff." And he had gotten word of that somehow. And they said, oh, well, this guy Max is working on this. And I got a phone call. And he said, oh, it's Al Warden. How you doing? And I nearly fell out of my chair, Yeah, I tell the story. I was in a meeting. I work in commercial real estate as my day job, and I was in a meeting, and I picked up the phone. It's just a weird number from it was Michigan number, and I pick up and I said, "This is emergency. I have to leave the meeting."
Yeah, sorry.
You don't hang up on an Apollo astronaut, and he said, I was already kind of getting the wheels turning on this, and he was very supportive. He said, when you get it really going, give me a call, and I got it going, and the message that. It's not just, as you said in the intro, this is not just fashion for fashion's sake or for, reproduction's sake. The mission is really to get people interested. So all of this comes from my work with museums and trying to educate people and get them deeper into this, have a personal connection and make it part of their everyday life. And I think that, making it a piece of fashion. And, you look in the mirror and you're like, man, I look really cool. Maybe one day I could be an astronaut or something like that. And that's exactly what Al Worden thought too, which is why he put his name on it. We did a special line, a signature edition Al Worden jacket that's based on the jacket that he wore in 1966 when he first became an astronaut. And I was very privileged to know him for the last about 2 years of his life. He died at the beginning of COVID, and we've continued that. And since then, actually, I have more with the Worden family and his grandson Will. We've sort of inherited his Corvette.
Nice.
Yeah, and the goal of that car is very similar to the rest of Luna Replicas, which is getting people interested in history and space and engineering and stuff.
Well, and of course, cars, yeah, you've also got a Shelby line of goods, which is very, very cool. And, for us car guys, I mean, to be able to reinvent ourselves or relive, if you will, the history. I mean, that's what those of us who love old cars, you and I are like that, and the listeners here love old cars, is to be able to wear what they wore back when and live the part. I mean, you go to a Cars and Coffee or a car show or a Concours or whatever, and you see people wearing, we mentioned Peter Brock wearing your jacket. I see him with that jacket on all the time. And I got to spend a weekend with Peter. My wife and I were invited to his home, he and his wife Gail, and we spent the weekend there. And he took us to a Cars and Coffee. I got to drive with him in his Daytona, and my wife Jill drove with Gail in her Daytona. And
there's no back seat in that Daytona.
No. They brought two Daytonas. Yeah, that's the Brocks for you. But he shows up with a jacket, and it's all part of the deal. So as you create these things for people, you're helping us kind of relive our youth in some ways, our passion in some ways, and so you've created like a real business out of this little side hustle thing, right?
Yeah. Well, and honestly, I mean, I've said this to people a million times. If I break even, I'm very happy. If I don't break even, at least I put smiles on people's faces and stuff like that, or I got people interested in it. Now, what you said actually is very poignant. Car guys are kind of reliving history. I mean, you're taking a piece of history, and depending on, the school of thought, how you restore a classic car, do you modify it and make it more comfortable, put airbags in it and stuff like that, or, modify it so that it's got lights and it jumps and whatever, or do you bring it back to the historical car that it was, right the day it rolled off the line? You're a piece of history. And as a current owner, you're a caretaker. Jay Leno says this, he's a caretaker. He doesn't own any of these cars. He's just the next steward for the next generation. And if he can keep them around or, ensure their future, that's, his job done. This is kind of the same thing. I think that, the cars and the mechanical and the nuts and bolts of car restoration is like half of the story. The other half is who designed it, who worked on them, who raced them, what their place in history was, and the guys and sometimes gals that were behind it. That's where the uniforms come in. Yeah. This is what they wore. This is the team shirt or the jacket that became the identity of that team. They were very proud to wear these things. It's funny. I met Chuck Cantwell at the Simeone Foundation a couple of months back, and he came up to the nicest guy in the world, by the way. He and Peter Brock were there. Chuck was there. The designer of the Viper was there. And it was just this really amazing crowd. And if you didn't know who they weren't going to tell, they're just very humble guys.
Yeah.
And Chuck came up to me and he said, the GT350 crew was kind of on like this shoestring budget. Like people don't realize it was, 6 or 10 of us or something. And then Ford would send us these cars,
Right.
we did it in an airplane hangar,
right.
Or when they moved to Venice, they changed their location, but we never got team shirts. And I said, well, Chuck, have I got news for you?
Yeah. I know a guy.
I know a guy. And I handed him a team shirt and he put it right on and it just brightened up his face. But it was one of those things like if it makes him feel good, then I think we know we're in the right direction. And by the way, those guys when they see someone else wearing it, they feel good too. It's not like you're taking anything. It's not like stolen valor or anything. It's really, you are becoming part of this. You're internalizing and you're making it part of your own identity, which is just so cool. I talk to astronauts regularly, and it is not to brag or anything, but like these guys, it was 50 years ago. The last man on the moon, Gene Cernan, took his foot off the moon 50 years ago in about a month.
Wow.
And we're about to go back. I mean, like, the Artemis program and stuff is about to go back. But for the last 50 years, there's been nothing. These guys came back and there were ticker tape parades. They sent them around the world on these world tours and stuff. And now, we moved on and people don't remember. I mean, it's this incredible time in American history. And the same thing with Chuck Cantwell and Peter Brock and Carroll Shelby and stuff like that. I mean, the people that know, but a lot of people don't know, and you got to wait till like a movie comes out or something is fashionable. This is a way to bring it back. And when I talk to these guys, when I talk to Jim Lovell or Peter Brock or some of them, Peter Brock maybe is a little bit different because the car world is so big, but the NASA world is one of those kind of like, well, are you a NASA geek or something? Jim Lovell says to me, does anyone still care about this? Have you sold many jackets? And I was like, are you kidding? Like, I can't keep them in stock. It's this amazing. And he's blown away by that. He loves that people are so into this,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's fun, and you're bringing back history and helping people relive. And I think it's tremendous what you're doing. I like to ask people about people who inspired you. You've mentioned a whole bunch of names already today that no doubt are inspirational in your lives. When you think about your business, Luna, is there a person that comes to mind that was a great influencer for you or inspiration for you to start this business?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll name a couple of people that are not, particularly famous. I've been known to name drop accidentally. I mean it very sincerely that I've been blown away by how generous with their time and with their contribution to this little company that literally runs out of my basement. And I use some manufacturing in Los Angeles. We try and do everything in the United States. Nice. So number one is my manufacturing partner, the guy that has made this happen and has the most amazing eye for detail and knows stone cold all the history. It's not just about the garments, it's about the history. And that's Monty Hom, who's my manufacturing partner. And he's like a brother to me. And I wish he could do more of this stuff with me, but we're halfway across the country. He lives in Los Angeles. I live in Philadelphia. So Monty is my absolute brother with this thing. And he's incredible. He's a Chinese American, and his great grandfather, I think, was one of the founders of the San Francisco Chinatown. And his entire family, the male side of his family and I think his mom's side and his wife are all military veterans. They've contributed to every United States conflict since the Spanish-American War.
Wow.
Yeah. So he actually has an exhibit it's interesting. We talk about garments and stuff, and usually, you meet someone that makes dresses or whatever, or they build suits or something, and they're just a garment person. My side of it is I meet historical people that also make reproduction clothing. So his Monty has an exhibit actually. It's called From Chinatown to the Battleground, which goes through history of Chinese Americans, Asian Americans in the United States military all the way back to the Civil War. And a lot of those people he highlights are relatives of his.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's just very interesting. And he has inspired me to go deeper into the racing stuff because he knew some of these guys. He knew Phil Remington. He knew, in addition to military stuff, he's also been a car guy, and he's got a 66 Mustang, and like he knew Charlie Agapoo and stuff. Wow. And some of the other folks.
So I see a STP jacket in your future.
Oh yeah,
Granatelli and those guys.
We're going to do Goodyear. We're going to do Penske. We're going to do anybody that wants to do historic racing stuff. It's actually, and you're a Porsche guy. So under the umbrella of Luna Replicas is Bowler Shirt and Uniform, which is the original company that provided uniforms and equipment to Shelby American and Ford and actually Porsche.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. The lime green jackets from Le Mans, the Steve McQueen movie, those were Bowler's 400 jackets. And actually we're going to be reproducing a version of that in the future.
Tell me when.
Yeah, right. I got to call Porsche first to see if they're okay, but we can do the jacket without the name on it.
Those guys.
So the Von Henkel family founded bowler shirt and uniform back in, the 50s. And they were originally for bowlers. They were for, sportsmen that bowled, and actually archers. And the design was this like gusseted t-shirt that was very flexible, and it's made out of a material that flexed in the shoulders. And Rick, the son, Rick Von Henkel, introduced the company to Carroll Shelby. And I'm not sure the whole history of it, but basically it was the same needs of pit crews and teams and stuff as some of the
because they're moving around. They need to move their arms and not be constricted.
Throwing a jack under a car, pulling a wheel off or whatever,
right.
Like it was very similar. And so Bowler Shirt and Uniform provided these uniforms. They designed parts of it. Peter Brock actually designed the CS logo that became the patch for Carroll Shelby Racing. And then all the chain stitch and all the other stuff, was all done. Actually, the patches were made too in-house at Bowler Shirt and Uniform. So fast forward 50 years, and Monty is working on the studio for Ford versus Ferrari. 20th Century Fox had reached out to Monty to reproduce those uniforms for Ford versus Ferrari. And we had been business partners for a while at that point. He went off to go do this film. And during it, he said, we should really do this for the public. Like the way that we're doing this, we're actually even going to go farther than the film did, because the film, it only matters what they see on screen. But, we wanted to get the exact fabrics, the exact feel, everything. So we found companies, a company that still does hand chain stitch embroidery with machines from like the 1940s and stuff like that. Cool. We found the patterns for the stuff. There's the welt pocket on the breast, the left chest there is, very specific. It's still made on old machines. I mean, it's stuff that slowing down and making it the right way in honor of these guys and doing it the right way. And we're also bringing back that brand. Like the Von Henkel family gave us the rights to bring back bowlers and inherit their history. So we are the original company that provided uniforms to Shelby American in, starting in 1963.
Wow. What a wonderful story. I love it. It paints a wonderful background to bringing all this stuff forward. So absolutely spectacular. We'll take a short break with sponsors again here. We come back. I want to talk a little bit about challenges. So keep that in mind. Pull into the pit stops and we'll be right back. You've heard me talk about Linkage Magazine here on Cars Yeah for a couple of years now. Well, they're growing. And in 2023, they're going to grow from 4 issues a year to 6. And there's an opportunity here for you to take advantage of this growth. If you go to linkagemag.com and click on the renew button, if you already subscribed, you can get a great deal. Use the code RENEW6 for 1 year and you'll get 6 issues for the price of 4, or type in Renew 12 for 2 years, where you also have a great savings. Plus, they'll even throw in a free Linkage hat. How cool is that? The publisher of Linkage is Donald Osborne. He's been a guest multiple times here on Cars Yeah. He's become a good friend of mine, and I'll tell you, Linkage Magazine is one of those newer magazines that you're going to want to get. It's all about experiences, opinions, and values. It's a wonderful publication, something I look forward to getting. And now that I'm going to be getting 6 a year, even more special. So go to linkagemag.com. Again, use the code RENEW6 or RENEW12 to get that special deal. Do it before December 31st, 2022, so that in 2023, you'll get 6 issues of Linkage Magazine instead of 4. Being a professional automotive technician today requires an understanding of technology, computers, and electrical systems that are highly advanced and very complex. Cars Yeah is pleased to support TechForce Foundation. It's one of our charities of choice, and its efforts to help young people pursue the technical education and careers as automotive techs. Through scholarships, grants, and good old-fashioned hands-on experience with cars, trucks, boats, and more, TechForce and Cars Yeah are working to connect young people with viable careers in the automotive sector. Join us by visiting techforce.org today. All right, we are back. We're having some fun on the break there. So, Max, obstacles, challenges. I like to ask people about challenges. This could be in life or could be related to the business. Take us on a walk that might have been a little rough, but it taught you a really valuable lesson.
One of the biggest challenges has been maintaining American made. And I had all of us, Monty, me, even Shelby and Ford were really interested in, and we're Shelby and Ford licensees, was maintaining, making these in the U.S. just like they were originally. And it started out that way. And in the 4 years that we've been doing this, starting with the NASA stuff, and then the last year and a half, 2 years that we've been doing the Bowlers and Shelby stuff, the American manufacturing community has, especially textiles, has completely changed. Part of it was COVID. Some of it was before COVID. It's just one of those things. Textiles are not made in the U.S. anymore. And at one point, I was really disappointed. We were using a company to do our knits, like the knit cuffs and knit collars and stuff. They were out of New York. And to say they didn't stand behind their product is kind of putting it mildly. They messed up a huge order of ours. And they said, well, I guess we'll fix it next time. That was really disappointing for me. And conversely, we dealt with a company overseas that was excellent. And I had a little bit of a identity crisis a little bit, where I said, I really wanted to do it all American made. At one point, 100% of it was American made, and everything's sewn in the U.S. and we contract with sewing shops that pay a living wage and stuff like that, which is why our stuff is not the cheapest, but it's excellent. At the moment, anyway, our team shirts are $150 each, and we're not making a ton on that. That's what it costs to do it here, and exactly to the original spec. But we're now getting a lot of materials are made overseas, and it's not cheaper. It's just done right, and it's actually done. And some of them we were on year-long waiting lists to get fabric in the United States, or we had a dye company that just shut down. We don't do this anymore. We only acid wash jeans now, but we don't dye. We don't do custom dyeing of hundreds of yards of fabric. So. I mean, it's not that big of a deal, but to me, seeing the inside of this and seeing that American manufacturing had let us down, I was very disappointed.
We could talk for hours about this. I worked in a company where we went through this when everything was moving to Asia, and
Sure.
We bought and imported a lot of very high-end European products for the garage, from Switzerland and even Spain and Germany and France and Italy. And then all of a sudden it all moved. And it was like, wait, and
it ain't coming back.
And then and US, we had a lot of things made in the US, and it all moved. And then it became very crummy and dealing. So yeah, I went through this, and I tell you, I spent a long time trying to find ways to get things made in this country. And this was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And couldn't do it. And then when you could do it, the cost was so high that it's one thing for Americans here to say, I want made in America. But then you say, well, the hat's not going to be $15. It's going to be $40. And they go, Oh, really? Oh, so yeah.
Well, and I live there. I mean, I live in that space. I mean, our products are not the cheapest. But I'll tell you, we're not getting you on the price. My mission is that it's done here, and I'm doing as much of it as I can. It's all sewn here. A lot of the material, the zippers and stuff, are made in the U.S. There's what we can get done here. All of the embroidery and stuff. I mean, it's made in downtown Los Angeles. Actually, the shop that I'm using for the shirts and jackets is just a few blocks away from the original Bowler shirt and uniform. So that's really cool.
I saw that on your website. Well, my hat's off to you, and I hope that you continue down that path. I think it's fantastic. Jobs are important everywhere, in every country, but jobs in this
and by
country.
the way, during COVID, Los Angeles, they were closing down manufacturing because of you couldn't socially distance on sewing tables. You can, but it really limits the number of people that are allowed in that building. Well, and if you weren't doing essential functions, they just closed down. If you're making jeans and T-shirts or whatever, they would close down the shop. Well, we switched over in April of 2020, April through July, I think, of 2020, we switched over to making masks. So we made somewhere in the realm, I think it was 40,000 masks in our jacket facility, which were, not hospital masks, but going home and walking around masks and stuff like that. So we made masks, and we kept every one of those people in business. And when Los Angeles, whatever it was, the enforcement arm of this, they came knocking. We said, well, we're making, and it was on us. We were making essential equipment, and they said, okay, you can stay open.
Yeah.
And that's what we did.
I had a lot of friends that had to do that in their businesses. The only way they could keep their folks employed. So
well, and it made a difference. I sold and shipped, and then we donated actually about 10% of the masks, so about 2,000 masks. So maybe less than 10%, 5% or so. Some of them were big orders for municipalities. It's a couple police departments ordered masks from us. Designed by a former NASA doctor, by the way that we did it with, nice. No, it was really, I mean, as you talk about early pandemic, that, everybody ran out of masks, and they're saying these hospital masks, like, were not really that comfortable and stuff. So, yeah, that was very rewarding. At the same time, it was just one of those, like, this is what we have to do to help out. This is,
and keep people employed. That's the important thing. So let's talk about, cool cars. You've had lots of cool cars. You have cool cars. Is there one car in your current or past that really stands out that you could share a story about?
Oh, yeah.
I thought so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Al Worden car is iconic in many ways. I mean, just these astronauts embodied this, like, more than jet set. I mean, I don't even know what the word is. I mean, it's beyond jet set. You picture like, a Pan Am pilot's jet set. They're rocket aces, and they drove Corvettes. Jim Rathman, through General Motors and Jim Rathman, they got a Corvette. Any GM car they could rent for $1 a year.
Nice.
Oh yeah, no. Since the Mercury program, I mean, Alan Shepard and these guys. John Glenn, I think, was the only one that he got a like a country squire or something like that. Because he had kids. They all had kids, but some of them didn't. Pay attention to them that much. John Glenn was a good family man, and he got a station wagon. But all these other guys used to get Corvettes, and it was right off the line. They just got them out of the showroom. Jim Rathman, he picked them up at Jim Rathman. Apollo 12 is the second mission to land on the moon. Pete Conrad, Alan Bean, and Dick Gordon, and they decided they were going to get custom-made matching Corvettes, and they went through Jim Rathman, General Motors, and they had these gold and black Corvettes, all 427 big block. And of those three, they went everywhere with them, and there's tons of pictures of them with them. I think the gold and black paint scheme was designed by a automotive designer too. It wasn't just picked out of the blue. And they had their names written on the side of them and stuff like that. So of those three, only one exists, and it's the Alan Bean car. Danny Reed, who owns it, bought it directly from General Motors. They gave them back after a year, and then General Motors did a closed bid auction, and Danny bought it directly. In 1971, he bought it from General Motors, and he's had it ever since then. And it's one of the inducted cars in the National Cars Hall of Fame and stuff like that. It sat in a glass case in front of the Capitol building in Washington D.C. for a little while. I mean, it's that.
Yeah, that glass box they've got there. Yeah.
Yep, that's one of the Astrovets.
Wow, Astrovet. See, they should have changed the name to Astrovet.
Astrovet, isn't it?
They would have sold.
Well, that's the name. That's the name of this project, Astrovet Endeavor. And several years later, somebody reached out to Danny and said, I think I found another one of these, because that was the only one that they could find out of the 6. So Apollo 12 had 3, and then Apollo 15, who had been the backup crew for Apollo 12, when their time came up to be a primary crew, Dave Scott, Al Worden, and Jim Irwin decided that they were going to do the same thing, but theirs were going to be red, white, and blue instead of gold and black. So they ordered them. I can tell you, this one was delivered February 15th, 1971, and then they went to the moon later that year. And Al gave his back, and then it disappeared. It disappeared until 2017, and someone said, "I think I found it," and Danny Reed went out and picked it up. And it was sitting outside, basically in a pole barn, outside of a pole barn. Literally a barn find of an astronaut car.
Well, everything changes. Well, like I said, I'm going to crawl into your skull here a little bit. Sure. If you were reincarnated, manifest as a vehicle, not what you want to be, how you perceive yourself deep down inside, what would you be and why?
I would be an Army Jeep.
An Army? Okay. Well, you've got one of those, right?
I do.
Yeah,
I do, and
why
I identify. It's kind of a jack of all trades, right? It's it does a little bit of everything, and I kind of do a little bit of everything. I'm a scuba diver. I'm a historic diver. I dive Mark V dive helmets and stuff just to teach people about it. If you could see, there's one right behind me in my office.
I see that.
That's a
yeah,
real
very
Mark V
it's very cool. Yeah. So you actually get into one of those things?
Yeah, it's 190 pounds with all the gear.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah. Again, living history. You do it for real,
Yeah.
and then I can now talk about it. I do stuff with historic ship museums too. One of my passions is military history and stuff, and I started out working at World War II sites. So World War II Jeep is kind of the perfect car for me. It's in the time period. It has just enough technological advancements to be, a modern car. You didn't have to set your own spark advance.
Yeah, just
or anything,
enough.
just by like about 2 years, like they didn't have to do spark advance, and it can go anywhere and do anything. It's the Swiss Army knife of cars. And I don't like, believe it or not, I don't like going fast too much. I mean, I enjoy a quick car, but slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah, yeah. There was a
45 miles an hour, is fine for me.
At the Ironstone Concours, they had a group of guys that had an old Army Jeep, and they took that thing apart, moved it 10 feet, and put it all back together like within 5 minutes. I think it was like incredible. Just pretty fun.
Canadians used to do that. I think they were called Ready Jeep, and you really couldn't drive them because they were all held together with pins and stuff like that. But yeah, they would take a running one, take it apart, put it back together, 10 guys or whatever. They're just the coolest thing. And you can work on them. That's the other thing. I love being able to roll up my sleeves in them. My points went dead. Like something happened. I think a screw got loose in the distributor and the points went out. I was driving down the street and, the points,
remember points.
They open up too much and you lose your engine. Like, and there's nothing you can do. It's not the battery. It's not literally on the side of a very busy street in my neighborhood. Cause I drive my Jeep to, go pick up groceries or, a 6-pack or whatever. I pulled over. Well, kind of the car was already pulled out. I wasn't going anywhere. Popped the hood in the back. They all came with a tool roll. I unrolled the tool roll on the fender. I popped a couple screwdrivers out, my spare set of points, and I fixed that thing right in front of traffic. I mean, as cars are zooming by, and I hopped in, fired it back up, and I drove home.
Where were you? I had my first Porsche 911 was a 74, and I was in the middle of probably the busiest intersection in San Diego. And
of course, that's where you always get a breakdown.
My points failed me, and I'm in a suit, and I'm getting out trying to push the car, and I'll never forget this. I saved to buy that car. It was used, and this guy drives by in a truck, and he goes, "Serves you right, you rich mother effer." And I'm like, I'm not rich. I'm just,
of course,
help me, And it turned out to be the point.
I'm not rich. I just have a sickness. That's the problem.
That's true. Yeah. So ended up going to one of those electronic ignition systems. That didn't happen again. Well, let's talk about a great book, okay? Because otherwise you and I could talk for days here.
We should talk for days. I think that'd be a fun podcast.
We can have you come back. How about a great book? Is there a great book you'd like to share that you think people should crack open and read?
I have two. Am I allowed to have two?
Of course.
The first is, again, because Al is was a friend of mine, very good friend of mine, and Francis French, who was his co-author on this book, Al Warden's autobiography, Falling to Earth, which is about him as a growing up in Michigan on a farm. Real quick, so on the Apollo program, they sent 3 guys up to the moon. One guy stayed in the command module while the other 2 went down the lunar module. Yeah. So this guy's by himself floating around the moon.
Yeah.
And there's always questions for these guys. What did you do? Were you lonely or whatever? Al Warden actually holds the record to this day. He has a Guinness World Record of being the most lonely lonely human in history. The apogee. Well, no, I mean there were lots of these guys. There were 5 or 6 of them. But his specifically, the apogee of his orbit on the moon meant that he was the only human for 5,000 nautical miles, which is impossible. Anywhere on the surface of the Earth, you'd have to go to another planet to do this, and be far enough away from the other 2 guys that So by nature of his orbit, because he was doing scientific photography of the moon, they came out a little bit farther. He's still the loneliest human in history. And he wrote a book about his life and what led up to that, and then how it changed him after he came home. The whole program, and being able to see the moon, or being able to see the Earth the size of your thumbprint, an outstretched arm thumbprint, being able to put everything you've ever known or you're going to know, or the entire human history behind your thumb.
That's a paradigm shift. Holy cow.
And no kidding, especially for a guy who's a combat pilot. I mean, this guy was an Air Force pilot, West Point graduate, was a flight test engineer for, at Edwards Air Force Base with Chuck Yeager. I mean, this guy was a stone cold, smart and competent excellent pilot. He trained his first year being a test pilot. He became a trainer test pilot,
Wow, his
test
first
pilot
year.
Yeah. And then he literally helped design the command module on the Apollo program. He's one of the fourth group of astronauts, and they sent him to the moon. He was one of the 24 men to go to the moon. So when he came back, he said, I was inexplicably changed. And he spent the rest of his life trying to get people to be inspired in the same way. So Falling to Earth by Al Worden and Francis French is a phenomenal book. The second book is by another command module pilot by the name of Michael Collins, who was the command module pilot on Apollo 11. And of blessed memory, he just died about a year ago. He's a quiet man, came from a very famous military family. His father was a general in the Army during World War II, and he decided to go into the Air Force just to spite his whole family. Like, seriously. So Mike Collins writes about in his book, Carrying the Fire. And he wrote it all himself while he was the director of the National Air and Space Museum. And that's one of his proudest things he ever did was create the current National Air and Space Museum on the Mall in Washington, D.C. was built by Michael Collins. I had the very distinct pleasure of meeting him. Al introduced me to Mike Collins, and one of the nicest guys in the world. And he's going to be very missed. But his soul is in that book, Carrying the Fire. And I strongly suggest people reading it. It's very inspiring, especially for people that are quiet and are not, that outgoing and stuff. There's a lot going on behind quiet people's eyes,
especially somebody with that kind of intellect. Holy cow.
Oh, and he was funny. Mike Collins was the funniest guy. He said for the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11, he said, I've answered these questions, the same questions for the past 50 years. Were you lonely? No. How'd you go to the bathroom? You don't want to know, And he said, this is the question in my retirement from being a NASA astronaut, Air Force general, he was an undersecretary of state at one point in time, and then, director of National Air and Space Museum. And now he's in his 80s. And he says, the one question I want to answer is, what's the best Cabernet under $12? So when I met him, I gave him a list. My father collects wine. I gave him a list that my father made of the best cabs under $12.
Wow, bet he
really appreciated that. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I like to ask my guests about what I call the ultimate drive. I have a feeling we may be doing something rather unique on Cars Yeah today, and maybe it's the ultimate flight. I don't know. But if I can enable you to go on the ultimate drive or flight, I'll provide you with any vehicle. If you want an Apollo spaceship, I'll send you up to the moon. I have a feeling that might be where we're going, but we'll see. What does the ultimate drive or flight look like for you, Max?
Oh, yeah. I would absolutely, go to the moon with these guys. The guys I just mentioned, Mike Collins, Al Worden. There's only three of us that can fit in there, but I think, and honestly, if he didn't have a heart condition, maybe Carroll Shelby. I think that would have been a heck of a mission.
Yeah.
I love it. The stories, you got to realize the time period this was, the late 1960s. So Apollo 8.
How they did it.
Apollo 8. Yeah. Like you're talking about, they're still using, they just got like solid state resistors and stuff, they were not using vacuum tubes for like 4 or 5 years. And I think the Russians actually did use vacuum tubes, and they got up, they didn't go to the moon, but they went up into space and stuff like that. And it's just like, can you imagine what we can do today? And I'm really looking forward to the Artemis program. And I think that all of these astronauts and the people that have been following this for the last 50 years are really interested. So going up in an Artemis ship with these old guys and then some of the support crew, Jerry Griffin, who's a really good friend of mine, who was one of the flight directors. You always hear about Gene Kranz and stuff like that. Well, Jerry Griffin was one of the same guys. And
well, gee, you're not into this at all. I really thought this would be more interesting talk, but
yeah. Oh boy.
Wow.
What's interesting is a lot of Apollo astronauts were into racing. They had to have a bulletin at one point to tell the guys, you gotta be careful, because if you get cracked up on
you're gonna mess
car
up
racing,
with our whole
we're gonna have to cancel some missions and stuff, or send in backup crews. These guys were racing on the weekends, SCCA and stuff like that. There's a great overlap. There's a Venn diagram of astronaut and racer that's kind of that has a huge overlap.
I can imagine why. Max, you've taken us on a quite wonderful ride today, and I would love to have you leave us with some words of inspiration, mantra, success quote, something to leave us with today.
Oh, I'm not as well read as I should be, you know.
I somehow I doubt that.
Yeah. Right. So this sounds kind of corny, but you know, look to the stars. You know, like there's really a thing to that. You know, if you think you can do it, you probably can. And even if you don't think you can do it, you can. Just do it. And that's how I started Luna Replicas. I mean, it's just an idea, and you have the right mission, and you look to the stars, and a lot of that kind of came together. And I'm very, very fortunate the people that have joined me in that journey.
Awesome. I love it. How can people learn more about Luna Replicas?
Well, funny you should ask, Mark.
Yes.
You can go to lunareplicas.com anytime you want, 24 hours a day. No, sorry. I'll do it for real.
No, you were doing that was great.
Did you want the tagline?
Oh yeah.
Mark, you can go to lunareplicas.com. Check us out there. We have a separate page just talking about Astrovet Endeavor, which is what we're doing for the Al Worden Corvette. Luna Replicas is split up into two halves. You have the NASA section, and then you have the historic racing section where we have the Ford and Shelby uniforms and equipment that are coming, and much more to come. We're just kind of at the tip of the iceberg right now. Yeah.
I love it. Well, listen, listeners, check them out because you're going to smile when you see what they got going on there. And who knows, you could even maybe be a little bit of a convert from a car guy to an Apollo space guy, rocket man. So, there you go. Check it out. Easy to find, Luna Replicas. I'll put a link to that on Max's show notes page, but just Google it. It'll pop right up. And I want to do a shout out. Thank you to our mutual friend, Harry Hurst.
Harry.
Your recent guest, Harry. Thanks for bringing an awesome guest here, dude. Wow. Nice treat.
By the way, speaking of Harry, the Astrovet is currently at the Simeone Foundation in Philadelphia. If you want to take a look at Al Worden's car before we restore it, actually, we're going to have a conversation about what we should do and how we should restore it, which is going to be a really nice talk we're going to do with Harry and some other guests coming up in the next few weeks and months at the Simeone. So if you want to see, you want to live it, and there's a mannequin of Al Worden right in front of the car too. So he's still with us.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, and I'm going to be having the new director of the Simeone Foundation, the collection, on the show here very soon. Of course, we lost Fred Simeone earlier this year, sadly. He was a guest here on Cars Yeah, so if you want to go back and listen to his comments about his car collection, his life, and so forth, you can do that on the Cars Yeah website. Max, thanks for being so generous today with your time and your
Thank you.
expertise. This was great fun. Until you and I talk again, I usually say I'll see you down the road, but maybe I'll see you flying out there in space somewhere.
See you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. This was great.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's ride here at Cars Yeah. Drive on over to carsyeah.com to find show notes and inspiring automotive fun. Download your free copy of Filler Up, a fun book filled with gorgeous photographs of fuel filler fun, including quotes from more inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Download your copy today, and we'll see you next time on Cars Yeah.